Hey there, Greeley. This is the Locals Only podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Eklund, a local businessman and realtor. And today we will be talking to Jared Nelson. We're going to be looking at Comparion Insurance. Comparion is a subsidiary of Liberty Mutual. Welcome, Jared. We're glad to have you on.
Yeah, it's an honor to be on here, man. You know, it's been great, getting to know you, working with you, and seeing what you're doing for our community. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Why don't you just kind of tell us a little background about yourself? How long have you been in Greeley? What other industries have you been involved in, and what brought you to insurance?
Yeah. Well, gee, been in Greeley, born and raised, over there at Banner. That's where I was born at.
Hmm,
So,
big old banner.
yeah, good old Banner, right? Um, yeah, seeing Greeley grow and continue to grow, which is phenomenal to some people. Some people, it's like, oh, here we are with the traffic now, right? Which
Yep.
I'll be the first to complain about the traffic in Greeley. But, anyways, yeah, before this, I was in ministry for 14 years. I was a missionary for like, it's hard to put an exact number on it, but 8 to 9-ish years, right? Or something like that. And there's like overlap with everything, just like you see in
Mhm.
ministry. Um, Leading mission trips, been to 16 different countries with multiple organizations. And then I was a youth pastor for some time as well. And then a good chunk of my work also was at Youth for Christ. And I worked with them for, you know, 8, 7 years, somewhere around there. And worked here at the Northern Colorado Youth for Christ. And kind of what brought me to insurance was to be honest with you, I just got kind of burnt out in the church. I got burnt out in ministry. And the year of COVID, 2020, I had 5 students pass away.
Mhm.
And so there were 5 GoFundMe's that we had to fundraise for.
Yeah.
And I started talking to some of my donors, and a lot of a lot of them were insurance agents, and they just simply were like, "Man, that's such a bummer. We could have gotten life insurance policies on them for a fraction of what you are trying to fundraise right now." And it got me thinking. I'm like, "Okay, well, this is more just like education that people need to know about."
Hmm.
So that's kind of what got me interested, and then dove more into it and realized how important insurance and the knowledge of how insurance works because, you know, I'm a young, dumb, youngin here in Greeley, and I didn't pay attention to insurance and how it worked. And I was like, nah, I just trust my guy, right?
Yep.
And that's not always the best thing to do.
Sure. Sure.
So,
And so you got into insurance. Now, what kind of insurance? You're talking a little bit about life insurance. What kind of insurance exactly do you do?
yeah. So, I sell every types of insurance that you can think of except for health. That's the first area that I went into, actually, ironically enough. And I was like, this is awful and I hate this and I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
But I sell life, home, auto, boat, trailer, jewelry, pet, um, you name it, and I can make sure that it's insured if it needs to be insured. So,
That makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, glad you made your way here, and hopefully that this journey is going to be good for you. I mean, it's one of these things. Insurance is one of these things that nobody gets super excited about, but everybody needs at
Yeah.
some level,
Well,
you
hey,
know.
agents get excited about it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I do tend to get excited about it, especially when I get quotes that are super high. I get a little excitable,
Yeah.
And so it's good for me to have people like you in my back pocket that I can talk to and say, "Hey, what's going on with this?"
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, right now, I mean, a lot of people are talking about insurance, and in the real estate world, insurance is a big hot button topic because things are expensive. Everything's expensive. And I see a lot of people right now that are gravitating towards finding just the cheapest insurance they possibly can. Um, what are your thoughts about that? Is that a good thing?
Oh man. So, you know, first and foremost, I want to say this. We have a saying in our office, and the saying is you pay to play when you're in Colorado. So, you and I know that. Anybody that lives here knows that. Like, it is stupid expensive. Um, to be here. And it's frustrating as an
Yep.
agent, as somebody that's trying to sell products, because it's like, well, we want to be budget friendly, but we're not always given that opportunity, right? It's some deity, if you will, that makes those decisions on prices. So when it comes to finding the cheapest insurance, that's not always the best option. And I'll tell you why. So a lot of people, they look at um, cheap insurance. So they're say they're getting into a home, right? And they say they want cheap insurance. Let's just get in the home and be locked in. Okay, great. Well, all of a sudden, backup sewer line, breaks. Oh, guess what? That's probably not covered under the cheapest policy. So there needs to be endorsements written on that, which makes it a little more expensive, but in the long run, it's going to save you money. So I usually like to come about insurance with my clients more as a consultant than a salesperson. And I
Mhm.
and there's times, Jamie, and I'm sure you've even seen it where I've turned clients away and I'm saying, hey, just stick with what you got. It's the best policy you'll get. You're technically robbing from the insurance company at this point. Stay with them. When it changes, call me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
sure.
so in that regards, sometimes the cheapest is the best, right?
Yeah.
However, you know, I always want to make sure that your actual stuff is covered, right? That's the bottom line. Don't always go for the cheapest. Say, catastrophic events, is my stuff covered?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's crazy to me at the difference in property insurance prices. I have some clients who are looking to buy a house and they called a few different companies. One of them gave them a price for like $7,500 for a year. And then the next one gave them a price for the same house at $2,500 a year. And they're like, holy cow, like there's a massive difference. And they're like,
yep,
why is it so different? It's like, well, we would have to look at what's covered
yeah,
ultimately, right?
no,
You know,
absolutely,
and so it makes it hard. And I'm running into, as a real estate agent, I'm running into more and more issues where houses have older roofs here in Greeley in the area. I mean, it's actually been a little while in Greeley since we've had a hailstorm to replace our roofs. And
yeah,
so I have one house right now with a 12-year-old roof on it. Um, right. And as you
yeah,
know, that insurance on that is going to be expensive,
yeah, no, absolutely.
you know?
Yeah, and something that I help my clients understand is, when we shop, anything that's older than a 10-year-old roof, a lot of it insurance companies are going to look at. With Comparion, I don't think we mentioned this earlier, but I work with 20 plus carriers.
Mm.
So it's not just Comparion Insurance. We're looking at Travelers, Safeco, Progressive, Nationwide, you know, kind of you name it, and we'll look at it, And, you go back, we haven't had a hailstorm. Well, because of our last hailstorm and so many claims that came through that's why a lot of rates skyrocketed and a lot of insurance companies pulled out of Colorado. So, meaning, yeah, they might insure your house now, but when you go to another carrier and you try to get them back, they'll deny it and they don't won't even accept an application. However, Jamie, as you know, right now we're starting to see those doors open back up with other carriers. So Nationwide, probably the biggest one, is back in Colorado, which I'm super excited about because they're a great company with a great price. So you're not hitting that extreme premium, but
Right.
you're getting good coverage.
Yeah. Yeah. which is good. I mean, insurance is such a weird thing to me. Uh, we need that competitiveness
Yeah.
to stay open. I think that's a
Yeah.
good thing. So you mentioned you have, a plethora of companies that you can shop out. Would you consider yourself more of a broker, or how
So
does that work?
yeah, it's complicated, right? If it was a Facebook status, it would say we're complicated.
Yeah.
Um, no, it's so we're not a brokerage. You have to have another license for that, right? You have to have special credentials to be a broker. So we're not a brokerage, but um, we we're kind of the other choice for Liberty Mutual, right? So a lot
Mhm.
of our agents were Liberty Mutual agents, and what Liberty Mutual did was they sat there and said, "Hey, we're doing automated stuff now." And so now they have these agents that aren't doing anything. So they bought Comparion, right? And Comparion is, I would say, the Swiss Army knife of looking at different options of what you need. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So, I have quite a bit of experience on the customer side with insurance. I've had really good agents, and I've had used companies that I can't get somebody to answer my question if my life depended on it. And sometimes I feel like my life does depend on it and I can't get
Yep.
answers.
Yep.
Um, and so one of the values that I have personally have seen by using somebody that's local, that's somebody that has a phone number that directly gets to them, is somebody that I can call and say, Jared, what is going on with this? Or I just had an accident. What do I do? Or we just got hailed on. What do we do? Or hey, I just bought a new camper. Is that covered if it's parked, at my house or whatever? And I've seen a lot of value in that. And so I'm wondering, for a lot of people out there that are listening, would it be something that you would consider if somebody said, well, I use Geico or whatever, faceless entity out there. I don't have an agent that I can call. And quite honestly, for me to call them is going to I would rather run a cheese grater over my forehead than sit on hold for an hour trying to talk to somebody that's overseas and I can't understand. Would
Yeah.
you recommend that they talk to somebody like you, bring their policy in and say, "Hey Jared, here's my policy. Am I covered? Or am
Yeah.
I adequately covered?"
Right.
Or maybe even because I know like when I first got into the real estate stuff, I looked at my policy and I was living in a house that I knew I could resell for, 400,000, and they had the rebuild cost at like 900,000 for my house. And I'm like, holy cow, that's crazy. And so
Yeah.
I called them and they reevaluated it. They dropped it down to, I think they dropped it to 400.
Yeah.
And like my insurance premium, I mean, I saved probably almost $100 a month just by doing that. It was crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of people out there that are underinsured, and there might be some people that are overinsured. And I would think it would be helpful to have somebody like you to say, "Hey, I don't use you, but could you look at my policy?" Is that something that you'd be willing to do?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I want to be your friend. I want to be your Swiss Army knife in your pocket, right? And so I've already had a couple instances even recently, right? Like I met with um, TRI, Property Management,
Yeah.
ran a quick quote for them, and um, it was coming back even on our systems because insurance agents, we have systems and they kind of say, hey, this is what this property is valued at.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a number that just gets plugged in, and most people are like, okay, and continue to move on.
Right.
But something I like to do is I look at Zillow, and I know Zillow's not always like the best, but that's where conversations with you come in hand, conversations with other people that are in the business. I'm like, hey, what's this property actually worth? To make sure that we're, not overpaying on insurance, to make sure that we're getting enough coverage for their home and just getting into that area that we need to hit, you know, and make this worth it. So, Yeah, that's something I pride myself in is I always give everybody my cell phone number. You can call at any time. I can't promise I'll always pick up, but I'll be readily available, right? So if you're calling at 2 a.m., probably not going to pick up, but I will call you back as soon as I can, kind of a deal.
Makes sense.
So
Makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Well, that's good. I
yeah,
mean, I think having that direct line of access to an agent, insurance agent, is super important.
yeah. No, absolutely. And maybe I'm old school, old fashioned, but even having an office here locally too, right?
Yeah.
Um, because I've seen a lot of other insurance agents like Denver, nothing against them, but you can drive to my office if you have a question, when you're out running errands with kids or whatnot, or, going over to the ice house on a weekend or something, give me a call. I can meet you at the office.
Yeah.
So,
I know within the real estate world, I've told people that a lot of times, especially when it comes to like lenders and stuff. I like using lenders where I know where their office is and I could drive to it, right? Because
yep.
there's times where I just need to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody and
Yeah.
just, either something's not going right or something's super complicated or maybe I'm frustrated and I just need somebody to hear me. Being
Yeah.
able to do that face to face is nice. I
Yeah.
think there's value in
Absolutely.
it.
Well, I got a
Yeah.
question for you, Jamie.
Uh-oh.
What's uh what's been your biggest frustration with insurance?
Oh, biggest frustration.
Yeah, I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. As a real estate agent or me personally?
Let's do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say as a real estate agent, it's frustrating how expensive insurance has gotten.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're seeing interest rates they've come down a little bit, but they're still really high for people in
Yeah.
comparison to purchase price of
Yeah.
properties. And so purchase price expensive, interest rates are expensive. And now we have this X factor of insurance that's also fairly expensive. And there's some properties. I mean, it used to be, I mean, just 3, 4 years ago, I would tell people, yeah, talk to your insurance guy, get a quote whenever you have time. We're not too worried about it as long as it's not in the flood zone. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Now I tell people like right away, like you need to get on insurance because if you don't do that, like it could substantially change your payment, right? Like the example I showed you or told you of like the 7,500 versus the 2,500, right? If your insurance premium is $7,500 a year, that's a substantial amount of money that you're going to be paying more per month. That changes your premium a lot.
Right.
So that's probably my biggest frustration with insurance in as a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Um, my biggest frustration has been as a consumer is I need somebody that I trust that can that knows my situation, that knows the complexities of my life, right? I'm a business owner. I own real estate. I have personal real estate. I have cars. I have kids. I have another business or a couple other businesses. And I tend to have a lot of irons in the fire. I need somebody that understands that and that is protecting me from an insurance perspective, but also being honest and saying, like, okay, you don't really need this insurance. You're a little overinsured here, right? Because the reason I do businesses is actually to make money. And if I'm
Right.
paying all that money to an insurance company because of insurance I don't need, that's frustrating. And
Yep.
so honestly, it's been difficult over the years to actually have somebody that really can spend the time to look at my situation. And everybody's situation is different,
Yeah.
but find somebody that can look at the situation and actually, make sure that I am uh adequately covered,
Yeah.
for what I have.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, first off, sorry about your frustrations. you know.
Hey, it
But
is what it is. I mean,
yeah,
don't get me wrong too. Like I actually believe that there should be something for everybody, and not everybody wants what I want, right? There's a
yeah,
lot of people that are like, no, no, no. I just want to log into a website, click a few buttons, and be done. I
right.
don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. I get it, right?
Yeah.
That's just not
Well,
me.
yeah. But to be real with you, my first client that I had, man, I got to tell you this story. He did the whole, hey, I got Liberty Mutual, right? And logged in, did his own thing, and he had a condo, and
Uh-huh.
he was only insured for 12,000, $15,000 for his entire condo. And I was
Yeah.
like, I called him up. I was like, get to my office right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, listen, I was like, technically, I can beat your price still at 15,000, but I was like, we're not doing that though.
Yeah,
And
that was probably a very cheap policy.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, especially, it being it was a townhome. So, those policies tend to be cheaper anyways, right?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, dude, I'm telling you, it was $8 more and I got him 100,000 in coverage because I said, hey, this is probably bare minimum of what we can do. Want to be budget friendly still, but also want to give you, something
Right.
if you had a
Sure.
catastrophic loss. And that's another thing that I wanted to point out. When you're overinsured, it's not like the insurance company is going to write you that full amount check,
Right.
right? And that's what people need to understand is like, well, my house is valued at this, and I'm overinsured. So say your house is valued at 500,000, and your insurance is saying that your dwelling is 1 million,
Yep.
right? You're not getting $1 million check. You're getting 500,000.
Yeah.
So you're still paying money on 1 million and only getting half the mil. So just a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
thing for the audience.
Well, and that's just it, right? It's like
Yeah,
we want to feel like we are educated in everything in the world, right?
yeah.
And I run into the same thing. There's a million people that tell me I don't need a real estate agent because I know how transactions work. I can do it myself. And
Well,
some people,
didn't everybody get their real estate license in 2020, right?
pretty much, I'm pretty sure everybody did. I mean, no joke. Like where I live, I can throw a rock and hit three other real estate agents in my neighborhood. I mean, it's crazy. But,
Yeah,
I mean, the reality is like everybody thinks they can do it. And
yeah,
there are some people that genuinely can. But then once you actually walk somebody through the transaction, then their eyes get open to all the nuances that they had no idea about in all the areas of negotiation they have no idea about. And so every professional industry is like that. The older I get, the more I rely on the professionals. Like I want to learn as much about insurance as I can, but to be honest, I still want to rely on somebody. And the more you teach me about insurance, actually, the less likely I am to just go do it myself. The
yeah,
more I learn about insurance, the more I'm like, okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Now I need to go talk to the insurance guy and make sure that, you know, we're
yeah,
on board. I still want to rely on him.
yeah.
And I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, well, and something just for the audience too. Like, there's a reason why a lot of people in our professions, we have to go test,
Yeah.
right? There's a time where it's like, okay, it's product knowledge, it's industry knowledge, it's all these things that we not only have to just test once, but we have to do continuous education classes on,
Yeah.
right? We go to continuous seminars, all these things. This is what we do full time. And so, when people can do it on them by themselves and they get it, cool, right? Good on you. You have way more time than I do to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I'm with you too. It's just like it's about relationships, and I think that's what comes down to even the Greeley Local Club, right? It's about building a strong, united relationship in Greeley. And when you can find people that you can trust, when you can find um, honest people, that's when you find gold,
Yep.
quite honestly. Because at the end of the day, Jamie, like the quote that I did for TRI, like it was overly insured and it came at $7,000 for the year and I got it down to 3,000. Guess
Yeah.
what? I get paid the same percentage commission on both on either number, right?
Right.
But I want to do the right thing and get them the right coverage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people think too, I know I've thought this is, well, if I don't use an insurance agent and I just go with like, the cheapest online one I can find, then my monthly payment's just gonna be so much cheaper. It's gonna be good. And I'm always surprised actually, especially in the insurance world, that a lot of times it doesn't save you as much as you think.
No.
And then in the insurance world especially, but even in real estate, it can be this way. It's like when you spend very little very little dollars, you usually set yourself up for potential risk down the road. And so like that guy that you had $12,000 for a condo, right? And because I know a little bit about insurance and condos, you have to replace everything from the studs in, right? So
Hmm.
sheetrock and paint and cabinets and refrigerator and microwave and carpet and tile and all of that. $12,000 is going to put sheetrock in your condo, and that's about it.
Right. Yep.
And so it's like you might be saving money, but how much is it really going to cost you? In the long run, it might cost you substantially more. And in the real estate world, we find the same thing, right? I mean, I deal with people all the time that are like, well, I'd rather just do it myself because then I don't have to pay a real estate agent fee. Yeah, that's cool. And some people are like, well, I'll go to the listing agent because then the listing agent can write the contract and do all the work. And then I don't have to pay a real estate agent. Well, what they don't know is the seller is going to pay a real estate agent, whether it's their listing agent or your buyer's agent. And so a lot of times it doesn't actually save the seller any money doing it that way. And so they don't
Yeah.
pass that savings on to the buyer. The buyer just doesn't have representation at that point. And
Yep.
so that could cost the buyer, and I've seen usually it will cost them 10, 15, 20,000, just in
Jeez.
the lack of ability of negotiation and not knowing what they can push on, what they can't, situations, stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it works out great for people, but I mean, it's unfortunate because sometimes not having that person, not having that insurance agent is going to cost you a lot more money, even though you're trying to save money. And
Right.
so it's kind of counterintuitive.
Right. Well, and I think the misconception too, um, that a lot of people are like, oh, I want to save money and do things my way. They almost feel like they have more customization by doing it on their own, which is, I think, false, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, when a buyer comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to buy a house," like you're gonna work your butt off, write down your notes exactly what they're wanting. If they
Hmm.
want a pink accent wall, you're going to find a home that has a pink accent wall, or go paint the wall yourself, whatever you have to do, right?
Right.
Um, and similar with my scenarios, right? Like, people look at insurance and they want low deductibles, low premium, all that. They want the pot, they want the cake and they want to eat it too, Um, However, I come at it more of just like, okay, let's look at what's more important to you. What's more important
Yeah.
to you? They might have some savings. They might have an inheritance that they're sitting on. So yeah, okay, let's kind of roll the dice. That's fine. However, most people don't have uh savings set aside, especially in Colorado because it's so expensive. And that way I'm like, hey, to actually save, let's look at monthly costs, right?
Yep.
So maybe we do a higher deductible on your stuff because at the end of the day, insurance, when you make a claim, even a zero claim, right? Say you call and say, "Hey, got in an accident, but I'm not filing a claim." That's a zero claim. It's on your record.
Mm.
And a lot of people don't realize that. And so going back to your point, am I a good person to call when you get in an accident? Yes. Call me first. I'll guide you through the process. And I'll say, "Hey, make sure call the cops and don't say anything about it being your fault or their fault. Make the cop make that decision, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's the only evidence that you really have at the end of the day."
Sure.
But
Yeah. So do you see a lot, so like Colorado, right? We have a lot of hail. That's probably our
yeah,
biggest insurance from a homeowner's perspective.
and fire,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Not so much in Greeley, but
yeah,
uh
but on the frontage,
yeah,
yeah,
in areas.
Yeah,
Um, when somebody files a claim, insurance claim, do you see that insurance premium bump up?
absolutely. So when you file a claim, you kind of gotta measure the cost. Like, is this worth it? And I will say this, like all the hail claims, do not, okay, I won't say don't ever do it, but um you gotta really sit there and say, do we want to pay now for a new roof, or do we want to pay over time in our premium for a new roof and then some? Because I'll tell you this, insurance and uh I feel bad for this, and I hope I don't get in trouble for slander or anything like that, but like they're not there to just hand out free money, right?
It's a
Uh,
business.
it's a business, right? And they got to make money. And when they're not making money, hence why insurance companies pulled out of Colorado,
Mhm.
it makes it more expensive, right? And so, um, my biggest thing is insurance is not a maintenance policy. So when it comes to roof damages, when it comes to like little things, there's a reason why you have a deductible, and there's a reason why every insurance company now is moving up to a 2% deductible moving
Yeah.
forward. Just FYI for those that don't know, if you haven't been hit with it yet, you're going to get hit with it. 2% minimum deductible for wind and hail, and anything else, we can play around with, but wind and hail specifically.
So 2% based on the home value
The dwelling,
or dwelling,
correct. So say you have a $500,000 home, 2% of that is, I can't do math off the top of my head,
10,
but
10, 10 grand.
yeah, 10 grand. That's your deductible,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Which I mean, if you're thinking, hey, you know what? If I get, a hailstorm, I'm just gonna, pay the insurance or the roofer myself. I'm not gonna file an insurance claim. I want to keep a high deductible. That's to me that actually makes sense, right? Like
yeah.
I got a quote on a roof the other day that it was like $9,000, which is a lot of money, but
Hmm.
I know if it was an insurance claim, that same roofing company probably would have charged 15,000 because that's what the insurance company was going to pay. And
Yep.
so if you pay for it out of pocket, it's actually cheaper to do the roof. You can do it off season and make it even cheaper if you want. And, if your deductible is 10 grand and this roofing company is going to replace it for 9,
Yeah.
then you would just replace it, not even file a claim.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, you know more about the HELOCs and all that stuff. So sometimes I'm like, maybe you take out a HELOC, replace your roof, and it might be better than
Hmm.
filing a claim down the road.
Yeah.
Um, it, it's that's probably the most frustrating thing as an insurance agent because, and I get it, like I'm a consumer too. And so people are like, well, what's the point of insurance then?
Yeah.
Well, the point of insurance is for, I don't know if you've seen the movie Danny Darko,
No, I
but
have.
it's a sci-fi with Jake Gyllenhaal. But
Okay.
there's a there's a jet engine that falls through the roof, right?
Yeah.
And it's supposed to kill him. So that's what insurance is for. That's catastrophic,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's for, acts of God, which, I disagree even with how a lot of insurance companies handled the whole uh, fires in California, pulling out and declining claims. Like, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Which I can't speak much to it because that's a different state, different scenarios, things like that, where, you know, that's what people don't see also with insurance is there's different rules for different states.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like that. I've always viewed insurance, especially in the health insurance world, right? Where health insurance is just super expensive. It's almost to the point now where to be self-employed and to be self-insured, um, individually is almost impossible. And so there's lots of the like, share costs programs out there to try to, protect people, but it almost forces people to work for a big company just for the insurance aspect of it.
Hmm.
And yet I've seen a lot of people, and I've fallen into this too when I first got insurance. And I used to work for Banner Health for a long time, and my insurance deductible was, $500 a year or something ridiculous. And so we would use it for everything. We would be in there, oh, we got a cold, we're going to use insurance. We do anything, we get insurance. Now, because I'm a real estate agent, I'm self-employed. My insurance premium is insane, but my deductible I keep super, super high. And I
Hmm.
keep it high because I keep it for, if I get hit by a train,
Yep.
if I get cancer or something like that. I don't use it when my kids are sick. My
Yeah.
kids, you know, I tell them they're not allowed to get sick. And so far it's worked out pretty well for me. But the
Yeah.
reality for me is like I just don't use it for all the little tiny things. I use it for the big things.
Right.
And I think homeowners and vehicle and property casualty stuff, that's probably a good avenue.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's probably
absolutely.
that's probably where things are going to head anyways.
No, I agree. But it's funny because Progressive, I think I was telling you about this, but I'll let the audience know. I went to Brass Pro Shop. Thank God I didn't buy anything. Um, First time I think I've ever walked
Tempting.
in there and not walked out with anything in my hands, right? But we did this training with Progressive, and they're starting to do specialty lines for side by sides, ATVs, electric bikes, motorcycles, boats, so that you don't have to file when, you know, say you have to make a claim on your ATV. You don't have to put that under your personal property home insurance. You have a specialty line that now doesn't affect your premium on your home. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot more insurance companies starting to do specialty lines like that of like, okay, this is where we're seeing a lot of these claims coming through,
Sure.
so we can help the average day American.
Yeah.
Let's start doing specialty lines and kind of breaking this out. And granted, Progressive, I'll be the first one to sit there and say, like, it is a little more expensive breaking those items out. But again, we're thinking long term. Like, what's the long term of this is going to be? And what's cool about Progressive too, we're in Colorado, we like to hunt. Um, they have on their ATV and side by side packages, and even on their fishing equipment, you can specialize those lines as well for if those get damaged.
Sure. Which is nice.
Yeah. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. We're going to start seeing more of that swing, I think, with insurance. I think it needs to happen. Um, but again, I'm not into what's that city, the Greek gods like city that they all meet and talk.
Olympus.
Trying to Olympus. There we go. I'm not into Olympus meetings of insurance.
Yeah. No,
I'm just a peon.
that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, like I always feel like when industry gets disrupted, you're going to see a bunch of people trying to do different things, but ultimately it's always going to sift down to what is the easiest, what is the cheapest, and what is going to be the safest option for the consumer.
Yep.
you know so like in the real estate world last year there's massive lawsuits that got settled, and a bunch of agents are worried about, are buyer agents going to disappear? What's going to happen with buyer agents? We don't know, um, because there's all this scare whether sellers are going to pay buyer agents anymore. And the reality for us is like, well, it people started off kind of scared. A bunch of different programs came in, a bunch of different agents tried doing different things, but things are kind of starting to settle itself down now, and gravitate towards what's the easiest, what's the cheapest, and what's the best for the consumer. And insurance is the same way, right? We're always going to be adjusting things, and that's where I think ultimately, we're probably going to see more people go to high deductible stuff, just knowing that they're going to have to, pony up if that, jet engine falls through the roof.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and
that's
in
the
the
reality.
reality, Jamie, like, think about where prices were with everything. Like, yes, everything's more expensive, but we're also making more money. It's not quite there yet, right? It's the scales are probably like this,
Yep.
but we're making a little bit more money than what we were 20 years ago, right?
Yep.
Um, average, right? And so your $500 deductible on your autos, like, yeah, that made sense because that was actually a high deductible back then when you probably
Yeah.
set the policy up. No longer a high deductible, and it's a low deductible. And insurance companies look at that and they're like, they're likely to file a claim
Right.
because it's a low deductible. And
Yep.
so those are the things that you gotta play around with, and you need an agent to explain these things to you. So, I look at it as I'm like your inside man on
Yeah.
telling you how to work it.
So obviously you're in the same sort of predicament as I am in the sense that there's a lot of insurance agents out there. There's a
Yep.
lot of big national brands that, you call a company and you're going to talk to somebody from India. And then there's a lot of local people. I mean, you just drive down the street and you look at the ads on the side of the street, there's a lot of insurance agents out there. What do you tell people when they ask you, why should I go with you versus, XYZ insurance company that's, you know,
Yeah.
just down the street from us?
A good answer to that is, I don't know if you should. And I say that because it's like, you know what? Like Con at State Farm, he kills it, man. He's good at his job.
Yeah.
Paul Dovenbarger over at Shelter, he's a mentor of mine. He kills it at his job and he knows the industry in and out. That's why I have him as my mentor.
Yeah.
Um, that's part of my interview process. Like I interview my clients just as much as they interview me,
Sure.
right? And so um, I want to make sure it's a good fit for everybody. And um, if you're wondering if you're a good client for me, are you teachable? Or are you coachable? Right? Because I want, at the end of the day, like, yeah, I don't need you to be an expert, but I want you to understand the basics of how your policy is.
Sure.
Most people, when I call and say, hey, what are your limits? They don't know the answer. They're like, what's that?
Hmm.
Right? Before I got in the industry, I didn't know what that answer was either.
Right.
And I'm like, this is literally the most vital, like, information that you need to know on your policy when looking at it, or what are your limits? And so just explaining that, giving quick highlights, I think that's why you should pick me if you pick me. If you don't know hurt feelings, I get it. There are people that are way better at selling insurance than I am, right? But at the same time, I don't think they're gonna take the time that I do because I care more about people than I do about the sale.
Sure.
And so, something that I've told you that I do is, I do renewal check-ins. So if your renewal is 6 months, I check in every 6 months. If your renewal is every year, check in every year. And I don't know a whole lot of agents that do that. I actually, I can't take full credit. Paul Dovenbarger, I stole that from him. He was my real estate agent. And I was like, man, this guy checks in and he cares.
Hmm.
It also softens the blow when interest rates do go up because they never come down.
Yep. Sure.
So that's kind of what separates me from the crowd is just that extra, like, hey, I'm here to help you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you mentioned rates going up and not going down, and we've talked a lot about uh, insurance, how expensive things are, and complained about that a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have a good answer for why things are so expensive?
It's interesting. So, a couple things that we can go around that is one, we've had people using insurance for maintenance, not catastrophic loss. I kid you not, when I was working um, as a project manager for a flooring company, I remember the sales team sitting there looking outside and they're like, "Oh, I hope it hails so I can file a claim."
Hmm.
And now I look at them, I'm like, I want to go back in time and slap them up against the head and be like, do you know what you're doing to yourself?
Right.
Um, and So I think there's that, using insurance as maintenance. Second reason is kind of unknown, to be quite frank with you. Um, People that I know have been in the industry for years, they can insure one house on one side of the street for, you know, let's say $4,000.
Hmm.
The other house across the street could actually get denied for insurance. And if there's an insurance agent out there that knows why, please call me because I want to know why. Nobody I know that knows why, that's been in the industry for 30 plus years, why that happens, but it happens. So I think so there's a little bit of magic and there's a little bit of um, using insurance as maintenance, not catastrophic.
Yeah, I can see that. I see it every once in a while where we'll have houses that I'm worried about. Like, man, is this going to be an issue? Are we going to have an issue with this? Getting insured, and then insurance comes in and it's fine, and it's actually fairly affordable. I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting.
Right.
And then I'll have some that are like should be a slam dunk property, and I'm like, what is going on? And then insurance comes in, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is insane. Like, how is it so expensive? And I don't have good answers for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
It's,
let's shift gears a little bit. We've been
yeah.
talking a lot about property casualty. Let's talk about life insurance.
Yeah.
Why do people need life insurance?
Yeah. That's a great question. I was actually meeting with another young buck. He's a sales associate, and we were doing a life campaign yesterday, actually, for work.
Hmm.
And he's 27, and he still doesn't have a policy on himself. And I've kind of called him out. I was like, well, can't sell something that you don't buy, buddy.
Sure.
So I was like, so let's get to the root. Why don't you think it's important? Right. And he's like, well, like I don't even have Netflix. I don't have any of those. And heard him out. And I was like, those all seem like luxury items. I would argue that life insurance is not luxury, it's a need. Um, Mainly being going back to my first point of when I got into insurance, right? Five
Hmm.
students passed away. An 18-year-old student died from a fentanyl overdose. She wasn't able to be buried because the family did not have the money to pay for the funeral costs, and you have to pay up front. There's no payment plans. There's no, um, you know, we'll pay it as we go. There's none of
Right.
that. It's you have to pay full upfront cost. And so I tell people if you don't have that saved up, you're kind of out of luck, and
Yeah.
now we have a problem. And
Yeah.
so my job, Jamie, with life insurance is to eliminate GoFundMe's. Um, that's like my big thing that I want to try to accomplish in Greeley, Colorado, at least, is like, hey, let's get rid of GoFundMe's for the passing of people. Um, and and really educate people because life insurance can be a lot less expensive than you think. So,
Sure.
how much do you think a $500,000 life insurance policy on a 29-year-old would cost? What would you be your guess?
I'm assuming we're talking a term policy,
Term policy. So we'll say, sorry, 20-year term.
20-year term.
Yeah.
Probably $20 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. 20, $17 a month.
It's almost like I have insurance.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at what half a mil does in the case of catastrophic, right?
Hmm.
Somebody passes away untimely, mortgage protection, um, debt get paid off, all those things, right? You look at the importance of having that burden lifted off at probably some of the worst times of people's lives.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to bring to the table with life insurance is like you're you're no longer sitting there like, okay, um, my husband passed. How do I pay these bills? It's okay, now I can take some time. My husband passed. How do I move on with life? Right? And um, firsthand experience. I had blood clots in my lungs a year ago, and I can tell you from personal experience, when you're on your deathbed, you're either saying, thank God I got life insurance, or dang, I wish I listened to Jared when he texted me 30 times and saying, hey, we should really talk about this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's why I'll text you 30 times is because I know the importance of it.
Yep. Well, and I mean, you talk a lot about being able to pay for funeral expenses and stuff because I know, like, obviously those kids passing was very impactful to you, and obviously a complete tragedy for the family. And then just to add, salt to the wound, then they end up having all those expenses that they can't afford,
Right.
which is horrible.
Yep.
Um, but my perspective too is, yeah, I want my insurance to actually cover my funeral expenses, but I've got four kids and a wife at home.
Mm.
And the last thing that I want when my family is grieving because um, somebody got mad and decided to take out a real estate agent in Greeley is I don't want them thinking, okay, now how am I going to pay the bills?
Yep.
How am I going to make the mortgage payment? How am I going to, literally, and my wife, homeschools our kids. She would have to send all the kids to public school. She would have to go get a full-time job. She'd probably have to sell the house. She would probably have to, sell at least one of the cars. And I mean, even then, it would be pretty massive for her to keep up with all the finances that go on. And
Right.
so for me personally, when I said I want a term life insurance policy, I came up with a number that would pay off all of our debts, pay off the house, pay off anything else, make sure all the cars are free and clear, and give my wife a good buffer to where she could live off of that for a few years and until she was able to kind of get her feet under her,
Yeah.
hopefully to give her some time to grieve, to help the kids through grief. But then just to alleviate some of that financial burden in that process.
Right. No,
It-
absolutely. And for myself, like I have multiple policies on me. I have a term and I have an IUL, right? And understanding the difference between the two is huge. One is, part of the reason why term is important is okay, if you pass away now, you got probably more things that you need to pay off. So yeah, let's get higher death benefit for lower cost,
Yep.
but also let's get IUL for the rest of your life. It's up into the age 120, I think, right? And so, somebody in their 30s, you're looking at $100 a month for 100 to 200,000 in coverage, right? But having both, I think, is the instruments that you want to use as you're building your net worth. Because as we get old, like, yeah, you have a lot of stuff now, but you and I both know, especially as a real estate agent, when you get old, kids move out, you downgrade, you, you start,
Sure.
going back down the ladder or the mountain, if you will. And um, so you don't need as much coverage, if you will, during those times because you've already saved up a lot. Hopefully, you've invested that money. As long as people are investing that money, that's the key point, right?
It's always the kicker right there.
Yeah. So make sure you're investing that money somewhere else. But, an IUL is a good product that if you're like, hey, I don't have a lot to invest, it's a good product to kind of get the boat moving a little bit, you know.
What does IUL stand for?
Index Universal Life Insurance Policy. So good product. I love it. It's phenomenal. There's only two products in the world, Jamie, that are completely tax free. Do you know what they are?
No, I do not.
One is a Roth IRA, completely tax free when you pull out of it. The second is a IUL. You can pull out of an IUL at any time, no penalty.
There you go.
So there you go.
There you go. Cool. All right. Well, I mean that answers most of my questions. Anything else that you think people should know about life insurance or about property casualty before we kind of wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I understand nobody wants to talk about insurance unless you're in the business of it, a real estate agent, a mortgage broker, or an insurance agent.
Yep.
I get it. But if you're just like questioning it and you haven't heard from your insurance agent in more than a year, reach out to me. Let's look at stuff. I can look it out on the back end while you get about your work. I don't want to interrupt more than I have to. So, give me 20 minutes maybe to just do a questionnaire
Hmm.
and then, go about your day. I'll work on it right next to you in our offices. And then, you
There you go.
know, that's about it. So for 20 minutes, we can maybe save you some money or better your coverage.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, insurance is one of these things in life that you never really want to think about it. It's not very exciting, but when you need it, you better hope you have the right stuff.
yep.
I
Yeah. Or the right
remember
person to
or the
talk
right
talk to.
person. I
Yeah.
remember back in 2008 when that tornado ripped through here. And I have a house on the market right now that was hit by that tornado. Originally, it was built in 93, but it was completely rebuilt in '08. And I know people who realized at that time that they didn't have enough coverage and they're still trying to recover. And I know people who had good coverage, they had a good insurance agent, and those people, um, they're fine. They were made whole. And the house that I'm selling, honestly, it's better than it was in 93, because they had good coverage.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
important stuff when you need it. Cool.
Absolutely.
All right, Jared. Well, I appreciate you being on. Um, uh, we'll definitely have links to anybody that wants to get a hold of you,
Yeah.
can connect with you. If you have insurance questions, reach out to Jared, and hopefully everybody has a wonderful day.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, talk to you later.
Bye.